Hey everybody, happy Saturday morning. Except it's not Saturday morning, it's Sunday night, and it's not a very happy one. I came home from vacation to find about a half an inch of water in the garage on the floor and running down the walls, dripping out of the ceiling. This is what happens when your neighbors hire dog shit plumbers. Thankfully, on Tuesday evening when I was leaving for my vacation, I noticed a small drip of water coming out of the ceiling right about there over top of my workbench, which is usually in that corner. So at the time I thought I was probably overreacting, but I was just being safe. So I wheeled my whole bench, I dried my bench off, the bench top off, wheeled it over here, pulled my welder and circular saw, all my power tools out, stuffed them in the back of the Jeep. I pulled the Jeep forward. Normally the Jeep is about here, way back here, parked. So I pulled the Jeep forward, put the windows in, closed everything up, and then I left for vacation with the impression that the landlord would figure out where the leak was coming from, and by the time I got back, the leak would be dried up and possibly even patched, the ceiling patched, the small crack where the water was coming through. But this is what I got now. There are literally chunks of the slab falling out of the ceiling along with plaster down onto the floor. Now this is normally where I have, thank God, I had my rooftop tent on the Jeep, because this is normally where the tent is hoisted up. I usually have the tent hoisted up in this bay here between this beam and the wall. That's where I have my rack mounted. You might have seen from a previous video. Unfortunately, I didn't paint my rack at the time when I finished it. I just figured it's not going to see any water. You know, might get a little bit of surface rust over the years, but no big deal. So when I got home, the rack was covered in water and rusting. So I had to spend the afternoon sanding it, cleaning it, and painting it, what I should have done in the first place. So that's done now. Paint's basically dry. That's ready to bolt back in once they figure out where the hell this water's coming from. Nobody seems to know, from what I can tell. The second floor says it's coming from the third floor. Nobody's answering the door at the third floor. It's a long weekend, so they're probably on vacation. Who knows? But this morning, when I went to move my workbench even further over, because this water's been slowly migrating, when I went to move the workbench further over, the caster busted on me. So that's fun. So now I gotta get some heavier duty casters for the workbench. So instead of coming in here and doing some small jobs that I wanted to do, some basically just fun, busy work on the Jeep, I spent the afternoon mopping and emptying that bucket probably half a dozen times. I got a bigger bucket in the corner back there now. I'm gonna have to come and empty that in the morning. And painting my rack here. All I can say is thank God that I caught that little leak before I left for vacation, because my bench would have been soaking wet with all my power tools, my welder, all that stuff inside there. It's unbelievable. So when I think about my favorite YouTube builders, I think about guys like Nate from Dirt Lifestyle, Chris from B is for Build. I think about Grindhard Plumbing Company and DIY Gang. And the reason these guys are my favorites is because they show everything. They show the good, the bad, the stupid mistakes along the way, and they talk about how they might do things differently if they were to do the project all over again. And I think that that's really helpful for other people that are going down the same path that they're taking. So in that vein, I want to share something that I did back in the day. Although I make no excuses, I should have done my research before I did it, and in all honesty, I almost missed it again. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you this, what I just found. So if you saw part 3 of this build series, I took the wiring harness that runs from my head unit back to these subs that I built into my rear bench seat. That wiring harness came out of the head unit and then ran underneath the carpet up here, underneath the center console actually, and then came out from under the carpet here and ran across the floor. And that was problematic because it was constantly getting kicked around and sliding around and banging into things, and that's not good practice. So I took that harness and I rerouted it through the firewall into the engine compartment, and I ganged that up with the power lines that are coming from my isolator behind my battery and running outside of the Jeep underneath, and then they all come in through here as one solid wiring harness. And that work took the better part of a day because of all the disassembly and all the wiring and cleaning up, and I even got the interior put back in, and so I shut the lights off in the garage at the end of the day, feeling pretty proud. So I came out the next morning and started dealing with reconnecting my my rock light wiring, and once I got to a certain point, I went to check and make sure they were working, and they weren't. And I went through this wiring and I couldn't find the problem. So naturally I came back inside, and when I took the shifter console back out again, I realized that I had somehow, when I was putting the interior back together yesterday, I had somehow disconnected the ground wires that were going to my relay. And then it dawned on me, why do I have a relay underneath my center console? All right, so I just want to take a minute to recap what I did with my wiring and why it's problematic and what I should have done. So this is your standard relay. This is what I had mounted underneath my shifter console. And right behind that is my rocker that engages the relay and tells it to send power to my floodlights that are mounted on my rear axle, basically up by the belly of the Jeep. So if you can imagine, this is an overview of my Jeep. Basically looking down on the Jeep. This is my engine compartment. This is my cabin. Battery is located on the passenger side rear of the engine. And my relay is mounted underneath my center console, and then my switch is mounted behind that. And here are my 2 floodlights. So what I had done is run my high output feed line across my engine bay, basically on the firewall here, through the firewall, underneath my steering column, and then back half the distance of the width of the Jeep to the relay. And so when I engage the relay through this trigger wire, I'm telling it to send the power back where it came from, through the firewall, back across the engine compartment, and then down to the belly of the Jeep, and back to my my floodlights. So when I flip this toggle switch, I'm asking my thirsty floodlights back here to suck 12 volts through this labyrinth of 16 gauge wiring. That's what I have wired in here as it stands right now. Just to put that into perspective, the distance from the battery to the relay is 8 feet in one direction. Then from the relay back into the engine compartment where it came from, and then all the way back to the floodlights back here, that's an 18-foot distance. So that's a total of 26 feet that these floodlights are sucking through 16 gauge wiring. Now, what I should have done is mount my relay right here behind the battery. So the only thing inside the cabin is my trigger switch, is my rocker switch, which triggers the relay. Here are my two floodlights back here. So in this scenario, I have my high power feed just coming this short distance into the relay here. As opposed to this option, that's only 1 foot distance. And when I flip the rocker switch, which is following the same path as this high power line is now, when I flip that rocker switch, it's sending the power from the relay here straight down to the belly and then back to my floodlights. So in comparison, the distance from the battery to the relay is only 1 foot, where it's 8 foot over here. From the relay to the floodlights, that's only an 11-foot distance as opposed to 18. So in this scenario, I only have a 12-foot distance. So now that I have my improved, more efficient, safer wiring set up here, I went ahead and took out the relay that I had under my shifter console, and I got rid of the high power feed lines that were coming in through the firewall into the cabin. Now all I have left is the wire for my illumination for my toggle and my grounds. I still need to run the trigger wire for the toggle though. So as it stands now, my relay's on the firewall here behind my battery. I went ahead and added a second relay, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to add a third, and I'm probably going to wind up pulling all these off again and reorganizing, because I'm adding more and more as I'm sort of learning. But I'm going to probably make some sort of plate and organize all this stuff on that. But so I mentioned the second relay. The second relay is for something else that I wired improperly, as well as the third. That second relay will run my LED light bar up here. Up until now, I had that light bar and this light bar. Don't hate me. I use both light bars for what they're supposed to be used for. I already have a winch. I already have lockers. I'm not a noob. I'm not a poser. I actually use the light bars. But at any rate, I had both of those light bars connected to the factory pull switch for the factory fog lights that came on the Jeeps originally. I don't know if there's a relay in line with this circuit from the factory, but I figure I'm not going to take any chances. So I disconnected the light bars from this switch here. And so what I'm going to do is I have this is my shifter bezel. So this is where my rock light toggle is right now. And so I'm going to make I'm going to put 2 more toggles. I'm waiting for them to come from Amazon. I got my rock lights, then I'll have my roof light bar toggle in the center, and I'll have my bumper light bar toggle on the right. And so the trigger wires, instead of what I was going to do is run the trigger wire similar to how my power feeds were coming through the firewall. But it occurred to me that I actually, when I rerouted my harness to my rear subwoofers, I actually brought that through the firewall on the passenger side. So I'm going to tag all 3 of these trigger wires into that wiring harness and just bring it through there. So instead of running from the battery right to, through a fuse and then to the relay, what I'm going to do to clean things up is come from the battery into a fuse box, and then from the fuse box I'll go to my roof lights, bumper lights, and floodlights. I left the line for the floodlights just for the sake of the comparison between Dome and Smart, but that's where I'm at right now. I've started to do a little bit of research into amperage and stuff like that. By the way, this is the floodlight that I'm running. I have them installed already. I haven't wired them yet, other than to just test them. I'll put a photo of where I have them mounted up here. So these, according to the box, they're running 15.1 watts, 12 volts. So from what I'm reading online, amps equals watts divided by volts. So 2 of these is going to draw 2.5 amps. So it's a fairly small fuse. It's not that much of a draw after all. But I'm not sure. When I bought my light bar, I just kind of tossed the box. But based on what I'm finding online, the average is about 7 to 9 amps for that. So again, not too big of a draw, but I still think that all of this is going to be it's going to be worthwhile, getting the advantage of less wiring and safety, and this is definitely going to be the better option. On a side note, the leak finally stopped. They managed to fix whatever was busted upstairs after nearly 2 weeks of water pouring through the ceiling. They're still gonna have to come clean all this up, but at least it's not leaking anymore. And I also got my bench rolling again. I got rid of these old casters. Look at the size difference. I essentially gave my bench a 3-inch lift. Doing a good job?